Welcome to one of the additional Bible studies for Waymaker Messianic Jewish and Christian Center USA. We welcome everyone who is here with us today, and for those who will listen in later on the archives as well. We pray that this is a blessing to each and every one of you. Well, we are reading from the Passion Translation today, and we are going to be completing the Gospel of Matthew, reading chapters 15 to 28. We may need a second part, I'm not sure, but we'll have to just gauge it as we go. Before we begin, we're going to open up our Bible study with opening prayer, invite the Holy Spirit in to lead us and guide us, and then we will begin. Father God, we just want to thank you for the ability to be here together to study yet another version of your word. We love your word, Father, and all of the different versions. Your word just draws us closer to you as we read your instructions for us, as we see your heart in these instructions. We just love you, Father God. We worship you and we adore you. There is no one like you. You're amazing and you're awesome and you're a good Father. We ask your Holy Spirit to come lead us, guide us, direct us, open the eyes of our heart and the ears of our heart that we may be receptive to the word that we're hearing. Show us what it is that we need to integrate into our being, into our spirit, and our walk with the Lord. Father God, we thank you for everything. We give you all of our praises, and all honor and glory belong to you when we pray this prayer in the name above all names, the mightiest name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. Amen and amen. So we're going to get started with Matthew chapter 15. Jesus breaks religious traditions. Then the Pharisees and religious scholars came from Jerusalem and approached Jesus with this question: why do your disciples ignore the traditions of our elders? For example, they don't ceremonially wash their hands before they eat bread. Jesus answered, and why do you ignore the commandment of God because of your traditions? For didn't God say, honor your father and mother, and whoever abuses or insults his father or mother must be put to death? But you teach that it's permissible to say to your parents when they are in financial need, whatever gift you would have received from me, I can keep for myself, since I dedicated it as an offering to God. This doesn't honor your father or mother, and you have elevated your tradition above the words of God. Frauds and hypocrites. Isaiah described you perfectly when he said, these people honor me only with their words, for their hearts are so very distant from me. They pretend to worship me, but their worship is nothing more than the empty traditions of men. Then Jesus turned to the crowd and said, come, listen, and open your heart to understand. What truly contaminates a person is not what he puts into his mouth, but what comes out of his mouth. That's what makes people defiled. Then his disciples approached him and said, don't you know that what you just said offended the Pharisees? And Jesus replied, every plant that my heavenly Father didn't plant is destined to be uprooted. Stay away from them, for they're nothing more than blind guides. Do you know what happens when a blind man pretends to guide another blind man? They both stumble into a ditch. Peter spoke up and said, will you explain to us what you mean by this parable? Jesus said, even after all that I've taught you, you still remain clueless? Is it hard to understand that whatever you eat enters the stomach only to pass out into the sewer? But what comes out of your mouth reveals the core of your heart. Words can pollute, not food. You will find living within an impure heart evil ideas, murderous thoughts, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, lies, and slander. That's what pollutes a person. Eating with unwashed hands doesn't defile anyone. A Lebanese woman's faith. Then Jesus left and went north into the non-Jewish region of Lebanon. He encountered there a Canaanite woman who screamed out to him, "Lord, Son of David, show mercy to me. My daughter is horribly afflicted by a demon that torments her." But Jesus never answered her, so his disciples said to him, "Why do you ignore this woman who is crying out to us?" Jesus said, "I've only been sent to the lost sheep of Israel." But she came and bowed down before him and said, "Lord, help me." Jesus responded, "It's not right for a man to take bread from his children and throw it out to the dogs." "You're right, Lord," she replied, "but even puppies get to eat the crumbs that fall from the prince's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Dear woman, your faith is strong. What you desire will be done for you." And at that very moment, her daughter was instantly set free from demonic torment. Jesus heals many others. After leaving Lebanon, Jesus went to Lake Galilee and climbed a hill nearby and sat down. Then huge crowds of people streamed up the hill, bringing with them the lame, blind, deformed, mute, and many others in need of healing. They laid them at Jesus' feet, and he healed them all. And the crowds marveled with rapture and amazement, astounded over the things that they were witnessing with their own eyes. The lame were walking, the mute were speaking, the crippled were made well, and the blind could see. For 3 days, everyone celebrated the miracles as they exalted and praised the God of Israel. Jesus feeds thousands. Jesus called his disciples to himself and said, "I care deeply about all these people, for they've already been with me for 3 days without food. I don't want to send them away fasting, or else they may be overcome by weakness on their journey home." So the disciples said to him, "Where in the world are we going to find enough food in this desolate place to feed this crowd?" "How many barley loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "7," they replied, "and a few small fish." So he gave the order, "Have the people sit down on the grass." Then he took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks to God. He broke he broke the bread and gave it to his disciples, who then distributed the food to the crowds. When everyone was full and satisfied, they gathered up the leftovers, and from what was once 7 loaves and a few fish, they filled 7 baskets. There were 4,000 men who ate the food Jesus multiplied, and even more, including the women and children. After dismissing the crowd, Jesus got into the boat and crossed over to the region of Magdala. Chapter 16. One day, some of the Pharisees and those of the Jewish sect known as the Sadducees approached Jesus, insisting that he prove to them that he was the Messiah. "Show us a supernatural sign from heaven," they demanded. Jesus answered, "You can't read the signs of the weather, for you say red sky at night, sailors delight, and red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. You're so adept at forecasting the weather by looking at the sky, but you're absolutely clueless in reading the obvious signs of the times." A wicked and wayward generation always asks for signs, but the only sign I provide for you will be the sign of Jonah the prophet. Then he turned away and left them. The hypocrisy of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Later, as Jesus and his disciples crossed over to the other side of Lake Galilee, the disciples realized that they had forgotten to bring any loaves of bread. Jesus spoke up and said, "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." Now, yeast is symbolic of sin. Remember that. Thinking Jesus was scolding them over not bringing bread, they whispered among themselves, knowing their thoughts. Jesus said to them, "You have such little faith. Why are you arguing with one another about having no bread? Are you so slow to understand? Have you forgotten the miracle of feeding the 5,000 families, and how each of you ended up with a basket full of fragments, and how 7 loaves of bread fed 4,000 families with baskets left over? Don't you understand? I'm not talking about bread, but I'm warning you to avoid the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They finally Finally they realized he wasn't talking about yeast found in bread, but the error of the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Peter's revelation of Christ. When Jesus came to Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples this question: What are the people saying about me, the Son of Man? Who do they believe I am? They answered, Some are convinced you are John the Baptizer, others say you are Elijah, reincarnated, or Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. But you, who do you say that I am? Jesus asked. Simon Peter spoke up and said, You are the Anointed One, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, You are favored and privileged, Simon, son of Jonah, for you didn't discover this on your own, but my Father in heaven has supernaturally revealed it to you. I give you the name Peter, a stone, and this truth of who I am will be the bedrock foundation on which I will build my church, my legislative assembly, and the power of death will not be able to overpower it. I will give you the keys of heaven's kingdom realm to to which is released in heaven. Okay. I will give you the keys of heaven's kingdom realm to forbid on earth that which is forbidden in heaven, and to release on earth that which is released in heaven. This is this is like the binding and releasing, like in spiritual warfare. He then gave his disciples strict orders not to tell anyone that he was God's anointed one. Jesus prophesied his death and resurrection. From then on, Jesus began to clearly reveal to his disciples that he was destined to go to Jerusalem. He also explained that he would be killed and 3 days later be raised to life again. Peter took him aside to correct him privately. He reprimanded Jesus over and over, saying to him, God forbid, Master, spare yourself. You must never let this happen to you. Jesus turned to Peter and said, Get out of my way, you Satan. You are an offense to me because your thoughts are only filled with man's viewpoints and not with the ways of God. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If you truly want to follow me, you should at once completely reject and disown your life, and you must be willing to share my cross and experience it as your own as you continually surrender to my ways. For if you choose self-sacrifice and lose your lives for my glory, you will continually discover true life. But if you choose to keep your lives for yourselves, you will forfeit what you try to keep. For even if you were to gain all the wealth and power of this world with everything it could offer you at the cost of your own life, what good would that be? And what could be more valuable to you than your own soul? It has been decreed that I, the Son of Man, will one day return with my messengers and in the splendor and majesty of my Father. And then I will reward each person according to what they have done. But I promise you, there are some standing here now who won't experience death until they have witnessed the coming of the Son of Man in the presence and the power of the kingdom realm of God. Chapter 17, Jesus' glorious transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the 2 brothers, Jacob and John, and hiked up a high mountain to be alone. Then Jesus' appearance was dramatically altered. A radiant light as bright as the sun poured from his face, and his clothing became luminescent, dazzling like lightning. He was transfigured before their very eyes. Then suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared, and they spoke with Jesus. Peter blurted out, Lord, it's so wonderful that we are all here together. If you want, I'll construct 3 shrines, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. But while Peter was still speaking, a radiant cloud composed of light spread over them, enveloping them all, and God's voice suddenly spoke from the cloud, saying, "This is my dearly loved Son, the constant focus of my delight. Listen to him." The three disciples were dazed and terrified by this phenomenon, and they fell face down to the ground. But Jesus walked over and touched them, saying, "Get up and stop being afraid." When they finally opened their eyes and looked around, they saw no one else there but Jesus. As they all hiked down the mountain together, Jesus ordered them, "Don't tell anyone of the divine appearance you just witnessed. Wait until the Son of Man is raised from the dead." His disciples asked him, "Why do all the religious scholars insist that Elijah must first appear before the Anointed One comes?" He answered them, "They're right. Elijah must come first and restore all things, but Elijah has already appeared, and yet they didn't recognize him, so they did to him whatever they pleased. And the Son of Man is destined to suffer the same abuse as what they did to him." Then the disciples realized that Jesus was referring to John the Baptizer all along. Unbelief hinders healing. They came to where a large crowd had gathered to wait for Jesus. A man came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, please show your tender mercy toward my son. He has a demon who afflicts him. He has epilepsy and he suffers horribly from seizures. He often falls into the cooking fire or into the river. I brought him to your followers, but they weren't able to heal him." Jesus replied, "Where is your faith? Can't you see how wayward and wrong this generation is? How much longer do I stay with you and put up with your doubts? Bring your son to me." Then Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was instantly healed. Later, the disciples came to him privately and asked, "Why couldn't we cast out the demon?" He told them, "It was because of your lack of faith. I promised you, if you have faith inside of you, no bigger than the size of a small mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move away from here and go over there,' and you will see it move. There is nothing you couldn't do." But this kind of demon that was cast out only through prayer and fasting. Jesus prophesies again of his death and resurrection. When they all gathered together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed and turned over to his enemies. They will kill him, and in 3 days he will be resurrected." When the disciples heard these words, they were devastated. The miracle of a coin in the fish's mouth. Unbelief hinders healing. That section, I just want to mention, this is actually, the disciples actually tried to cast out that demon um, before Jesus was on the scene, and they could not. And this is why he was rebuking them about their faith to do it. But then he also said there are kinds of demons that you have to pray and fast before you uh, would cast them out. And he indicated this was one of those. Okay, the miracle of a coin in a fish's mouth. After they arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax approached Peter and asked, "Does your teacher pay the tax for the upkeep of the temple like the rest of us?" "Of course he does," Peter answered. When Peter walked into the house and before he had a chance to speak, Jesus spoke up and said, "Peter, I have a question for you. Who pays tolls or taxes to a king? Is tax collected from a king's own children or from his subjects?" "From his subjects," Peter answered. And Jesus replied, "That's right. The children get all off free without paying taxes. But so that we don't offend them, go to the lake and throw out your hook, and the first fish that rises up will have a coin in its mouth. It will be the exact money you need to pay the temple tax for both of us." Chapter 18, who is the greatest in the kingdom realm? At that time, the disciples came to ask Jesus, who is considered to be the greatest in the heavens kingdom realm? Jesus called a little one to his side and said to them, learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with the wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in. Whoever continually humbles himself to become like this gentle child is the greatest one in heaven's kingdom realm. And if you tenderly care for this little one on my behalf, you are tenderly caring for me. But if anyone abuses one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for him to have a heavy boulder tied around his neck and be hurled into the deepest sea than to face the punishment he deserves. Misery will come to the one who lures people away into sin. Troubles and obstacles to your faith are inevitable, but great devastation will come to the one guilty of causing others to leave the path of righteousness. If your hand clings to sin, cut it off and throw it away. If your foot continually steps one onto sin's path, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to enter into heaven crippled and maimed than to have both hands and both feet be thrown into eternal fire. And if your eye is always focused on sin, pluck it out and throw it away, for it is better for you to enter into heaven with one eye than to be thrown into hell fire with two. Be careful that you are not corrupt, and be careful that you do not corrupt any of these little ones, for I can assure you that in heaven each of their angelic guardians have instant access to my heavenly Father. So it's important, to speak truth, and for those that are teaching false doctrine, that's a warning for you too, because like the false doctrines that's out there is like causing people to go astray as well. So that's not only we need to be discerning, but those that are doing these things need to stop and repent, because the Lord will deal with us. A parable of the lost lamb. The Son of Man has come to give life to anyone who is lost. Think of it this way: if a man owns 100 sheep and one lamb wanders away and is lost, won't he leave the 99 grazing on the hillside and go out and thoroughly search for the one lost lamb? And if he finds the lamb, the little lost lamb, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 who are safe. Now you should understand that it is never the desire of your heavenly Father that a single one of these humble believers should be lost. Restoring broken relationships. If your fellow believer sins against you, you must go to that one privately and attempt to resolve the matter. If he responds, your relationship is restored. But if his heart is closed to you, then go to him again, taking one or two others with you. You'll be fulfilling what the scripture teaches when it says, every word may be verified by the testimony of two or three witnesses. And if he refuses to listen, then then share the issue with the entire church in hopes of restoration. If he still refuses to respond, disregarding fellowship of his church family, you must disregard him as though he were an outsider on the same level as an unrepentant sinner. Receive this truth: whatever you forbid on earth will be considered to be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you release on earth will be considered to be released in heaven. Now that's the binding and releasing also. Again, I give you an eternal truth. If two of you agree to ask God to do something in a symphony prayer, my heavenly Father will do it for you. For wherever two or three come together in honor of my name, I am right there with them. Unlimited forgiveness. Later, Peter approached Jesus and said, "How many times do I have to forgive my fellow believer who keeps offending me? 7 times?" Jesus answered, "Not 7 times, Peter, but 70 times 7." Okay, so the lessons of forgiveness in heaven's kingdom realm can be illustrated like this. There once was a king who had servants who had borrowed money from the royal treasury. He decided to settle accounts with each of them. As he began the process, it came to his attention that one of his servants owed him $1 billion. So he summoned the servant before him and said to him, "Pay me what you owe me." When his servant was unable to repay his debt, the king ordered that he be sold as a slave along with his wife and children and every possession they owned as payment toward his debt. The servant threw himself face down at his master's feet and begged for mercy. "Please be patient with me. Just give me more time and I will repay you all that I owe." Upon hearing his plea, the king had compassion on his servant and released him and forgave his entire debt. No sooner had the servant left when he met one of his fellow servants who owed him $20,000, and he seized him by the throat and began to choke him, saying, "You better pay me right now everything you owe me." His fellow servant threw himself face down at his feet and begged, "Please be patient with me. If you'll just give me time, I will repay you all that is owed." But the one who had his debt forgiven stubbornly refused to forgive what was owed him. He had his fellow servant thrown into prison and demanded he remain there until he repaid the debt in full. When his associates saw what was going on, they were outraged and went to the king and told him the whole story. The king said to him, "You scoundrel, is this the way you respond to my mercy? Because you begged me, I forgave you the massive debt that you owed me. Why didn't you show the same mercy to your fellow servant that I showed to you?" In a fury of anger, the king turned him over to the prison guards to be tortured until all his debt was repaid. In this same way, my heavenly Father will deal with any of you if you do not release forgiveness from your heart towards your fellow believers. Chapter 19, Questions about Divorce. After Jesus finished teaching them, he left Galilee and made his way towards the district of Judea, east of the Jordan River. Massive crowds followed him, and he healed all who were sick. The Pharisees were intent on putting Jesus to the test with difficult questions, so they approached him and asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason?" "Haven't you read the scriptures about creation?" Jesus replied. "The Creator made us male and female from the very beginning, and for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and live with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. From then on, they are no longer two, but united as one. So what God united, let no one divide." They responded, "So then why did Moses command us to give a certificate of divorce, and it would be lawful?" And Jesus said, "Moses permitted you to divorce because your hearts are so hard and stubborn. But originally there was no such thing. But I say to you, whoever leaves his wife for any reason other than immorality, then takes another wife is living in adultery, and whoever takes a divorced woman in marriage is also living in adultery." His disciples spoke up and said, "If this is the standard, then it seems better never get married." Not everyone is meant to remain single, only those whom God gives grace to be unmarried. For some are born to celibacy, others have been made eunuch by others, and there are some who have chosen to live in celibacy for the sacred purpose of heaven's kingdom realm. Let those who can accept this truth for themselves. Jesus and little children. Then they brought little children to Jesus so that he would lay his hands on them, bless them, and pray for them. But the disciples scolded those who brought the children then saying, "Don't bother him with this now." Jesus overheard them and said, "I want little children to come to me, so never interfere with them when they want to come for heaven's kingdom. for heaven's kingdom realm is composed of beloved ones like these. Listen to this truth. No one will enter the kingdom realm of heaven unless he becomes like one of these. Then he laid his hands on each of them and went on his way. A rich young man questions Jesus. Then a teenager approached Jesus and bowed before him, saying, Wonderful teacher, is there a good work I have to do to obtain eternal life? Jesus answered, Why would you call me wonderful? God alone is wonderful. Now, in other Bibles, the word is good. And why would you ask what good work you need to do? Keep the commandments and you'll enter into the life of God. Which ones? He asked. Jesus said, Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, honor your father and mother, and love those around you as you love yourself. But I've always obeyed every one of them without fail, the young man replied. What else do I lack? And Jesus said to him, If you really want to be perfect, go immediately and sell everything you own. Give all your money to the poor, and your treasure will be transferred into heaven. Then come back and follow me for the rest of your life. When the young man heard these words, he walked away angry, for he was extremely wealthy. Then Jesus turned to his disciples and said, Listen, do you understand how difficult it is for the rich to enter into heaven's kingdom realm? In fact, it's easier to stuff a heavy rope through the eye of a needle than it is for the wealthy to enter into God's kingdom realm. Stunned and bewildered, his disciples asked, Then who in the world can possibly be saved? Looking straight into their eyes, Jesus replied, Humanly speaking, no one, because no one can save himself. So remember that when we get to the altar call, no one can save themselves. But what seems impossible to you is never impossible to God. Then Peter blurted out, Here we are. We've given up everything to follow you. What reward will there be for us? Then Jesus blurted out, I'm sorry, listen to the truth. In the age of the restoration of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will have 12 thrones of your own, and you will govern the 12 tribes of Israel. For anyone who has left behind their home and property, leaving family, brothers or sisters, mothers or fathers, or children for my sake, they will be repaid 100 times over and will inherit eternal life. But many will push themselves to be first, will find themselves last. And those who are willing to be last will find themselves to be first. I'm sorry, I had to pause it there for a minute because the online recorder is making heavy spikes, and I'm not sure if this is going to be choppy or not. So hopefully not. And we're doing pretty good with time, so we may be able to do this all in one part. A parable of workers in the vineyard. This will help you understand the way heaven's kingdom operates. There once was a wealthy landowner who went out at daybreak to hire all the laborers he could find to work in his vineyard. After agreeing to pay the standard day's wages, he put them to work. Then at 9 o'clock, as he was passing through the town square, he found others standing around without work. He told them, Come and work for me in my vineyard, and I'll pay you a fair wage. So off they went to join the others. He did the same thing at noon and again at 3 o'clock, making the same arrangement as he did with the others, hoping to finish his harvest. That day he went to the town square again at 5 o'clock and found more who were idle. So he said to them, Why have you been here all day without work? Because no one hired us, they answered. So he said to them, Then go and join my crew and work in my vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard went to his foreman and said, Call in all the laborers, line them up, and pay them the same wages, starting with the most recent ones that I hired, and finishing with the others who worked all day. So when those hired late in the day came to be paid, they were given a full day's wage. And when those who had been hired first came to be paid, they were convinced that they would receive more, but everyone was paid the standard wage. When they realized what had happened, they were offended and complained to the landowner, saying, "You're treating us unfairly. They've only worked for 1 hour, while we slaved and sweat all day long under the scorching sun. You've made them equal to us." The landowner replied, "Friends, I'm not being unfair. I'm doing exactly what I said. Didn't you agree to work for the standard wage? If I want to get if I want to give those who only worked for an hour equal pay, what does that matter to you? Don't I have the right to do what I want with what is mine? What should be what should my generosity make you jealous of them? Why?" So now you can understand what I meant when I said that the first will end up last and the last will end up being first. Everyone is invited, but few are the chosen. Jesus again prophesies his death. Now, he was trying very hard to prepare the disciples, but there was really no preparing them for how horrible this was going to be and really what was going to happen. And they also struggled even as it was happening and afterwards. Um, so Jesus again prophesies his death. Jesus was about to go to Jerusalem, so he took his 12 disciples aside privately and said to them, "Listen to me. We're on our way to Jerusalem, and I need to remind you that the Son of Man will be handed over to the religious leaders and scholars, and they will sentence him to be executed. And they will hand him over to the Romans to be mocked, tortured, and crucified. Yet 3 days later, he will be raised to life again." The ambition of Jacob and John. The wife of Zebedee approached Jesus with her sons, Jacob and John. She knelt before him and asked him for a favor. He said to her, "What is it that you want?" She answered, he answered, "Make the decree that these my sons will rule with you in your kingdom, one sitting on your right hand, one on your left." That was the mother. Jesus replied, "You don't know what you're asking." Then, looking in the eyes of Jacob and John, Jesus said, "Are you prepared to drink from the cup of suffering that I am about to drink? And are you able to endure the baptism into death that I am about to endure?" They answered him, "Yes, we are able." "You will indeed drink the cup of my suffering and be immersed into my death," Jesus told him. "But to be the ones who sit at the place of highest honor is not mine to decide. My Father is the one who chooses them and prepares them." The other 10 disciples were listening to all of this, and a jealous anger arose among them against the two brothers. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, called them to his side and said, "Kings and those with great authority in this world rule oppressively over their subjects like tyrants. But this is not your calling. You will lead by a completely different model. The greatest one among you will live as the one who is called to serve others, because the greatest honor and authority is reserved for the one with the heart of a servant. For even the Son of Man did not come expecting to be served by everyone, but to serve everyone and to give his life in exchange for the salvation of many." And we will get into that a little bit later with the altar call. Two blind men, two blind men healed. As Jesus approached Jericho, an immense crowd gathered and followed him. And there were two blind men sitting on the roadside. When they heard that it was Jesus passing by, they shouted, "Son of David, show us mercy, Lord." Those in the crowd scolded them and told them to be quiet, but the blind men screamed out even louder, "Jesus, Son of David, show us mercy, Lord." So Jesus stopped and had them brought to him. He asked them, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said, "Lord, we want to see. Heal us." Jesus was deeply moved with compassion toward them. So he touched their eyes, and instantly they could see. Jesus said to them, "Your faith has healed you." And all the people praised God because of this miracle, and the two men became his followers from that day onward. So, chapter 30, I'm sorry, chapter 21, Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Now, as they were approaching Jerusalem, they arrived at the place of the stables near the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent two of his disciples ahead, saying, "As soon as you enter the village, you will find a donkey tethered along with her young colt. Untie them both and bring them to me. And if anyone stops you and asks, 'What are you doing?' just tell them, 'The Lord of all needs them, and he will let you take them.'" All of this happened to fulfill the prophecy. "Tell Zion's daughter, 'Look, your king arrives. He's coming to you, full of gentleness, sitting on a donkey, riding on a donkey's colt.'" So the two disciples went on and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and her colt to him and placed the cloaks and prayer shawls on the colt, and Jesus rode on it. Then an exceptionally large crowd gathered and carpeted the road before him with their cloaks and prayer shawls. Others cut down branches from trees to spread in his path. Jesus rode in the center of the procession, crowds going before him and crowds coming behind him, and they all shouted, "Bring victory, Lord, Son of David. He comes with the blessings of being sent from the Lord Yahweh." We celebrate with praises to God in the highest. What they actually said was, "Baruch haba b'shem Adonai," he who comes in the name of the Lord. As Jesus entered Jerusalem, the people went wild with excitement. The entire city was thrown into an uproar. Some asked, "Who is this man?" And the crowd shouted back, "This is Jesus. He's the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee." Jesus in the temple. Upon entering Jerusalem, Jesus went directly into the temple area and drove away all the merchants who had been buying and selling their goods. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the stands of those selling doves. And he said to them, "My dwelling place will be known as a house of prayer, but you have made it into a hangout for thieves." Then the blind and the crippled came into the temple courts, and Jesus healed them all. And the children circled around him, shouting out blessings and praises to the Son of David. But when the chief priests and religious scholars heard the children shouting and saw all the wonderful miracles of healing, they were furious. They said to Jesus, "Don't you hear what these children are saying? This is not right." Jesus answered, "Yes, I hear them. But have you never heard the words, 'You have fashioned the lips of children and the little ones to compose your praises'?" Jesus then left at once for the nearby village of Bethany, where he spent the night. While walking back into the city the next morning, he got hungry. He noticed a lone fig tree by the side of the path and walked over to see if there was any fruit on it at all, but there was none. He found only leaves. So he spoke to the fig tree and said, "You will be barren and will never bear fruit again." Immediately the fig tree shriveled up right in front of their eyes. Astonished, his disciples asked, "How did you make that fig tree instantly wither and die?" Jesus replied, "Listen to the truth. If you have no doubt of God's power and speak out of faith's fullness, you can be the one who speaks to a tree and it will wither away. Even more than that, you could say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and be thrown into the sea,' and it will be done. Everything you pray for with the fullness of faith you will receive." The authority of Jesus. After this, Jesus went into the temple courts and taught the people. The leading priests and Jewish elders approached him and interrupted him and asked, "By what power do you do these things, and who granted you the authority to teach here?" Jesus answered them, "I too have a question to ask you. If you can answer this question, then I will tell you by what power I do these things. From where did John's authority to baptize come from heaven or from people?" They stepped away and debated among themselves, saying, "How should we respond? I'm sorry. How should we answer this? If we say from heaven, he will say to us, 'Then why didn't you respond to John and believe when he said?' But if we deny that God gave him his authority, we'll be mobbed by the people, for they're convinced that John was God's prophet." So they finally answered, "We don't know." Then neither will I tell you from where my power comes to do these things, he replied. The parable of two sons. Jesus said to his critics, "Tell me what you think of this parable," he said. "There was once a man who had two sons. The father came to the first and said, 'Son, I want you to go out and work in the vineyard today.' This son said, I'd rather not, but afterward he deeply regretted what he said to his father, changed his mind, and decided to go to the vineyard. The father approached the second son and said the same thing to him. The son replied, 'Father, I will go and do as you said.' But he never did. He didn't go to the vineyard. Tell me now, which of these two sons did the will of his father?" They answered him, "The first one." Jesus said, "You're right, for many sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes are going into God's kingdom ahead of you. John came to show you the path of goodness and righteousness, yet you despised Yet the despised and the outcast believed in him, but you did not. When you saw them turn, you neither repented of your ways nor believed his words." So then we have the parable of the rejected son. Pay close attention to this parable, Jesus said. There once was an honorable man who planted a vineyard. He built a fence around it, dug out a pit for pressing the grapes, and erected a watchtower. And afterwards, he leased the land to tenant farmers, and then went a distance away. At harvest time, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect the portion that was that was due him as the Lord of the vineyard. But the tenants seized his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. So the landowner sent other servants, even more than the first, but they were mistreated the same way. Finally, he sent his own son to them, and he said to him, "Perhaps with my own son standing before them, they will be ashamed of what they've done." But when the tenants saw the son, they said, "This is the heir, let's kill him, and then we can have the inheritance." So they violently seized him, took him outside the vineyard, and murdered him. You tell me, when the Lord of the vineyard comes, what do you think he will do to those tenants? They answered, "He will bring a horrible death to those who did this evil, and he will completely destroy them. Then he'll lease his vineyard to different tenants who would be faithful to give him the portion he deserves." Jesus said to them, "Haven't you ever read the scripture that says, 'The very stone the builders rejected as flawed has now become the most important capstone of the arch'? This was the Lord's plan. Isn't it a miracle for our eyes to behold? This is why I say to you that the kingdom realm of God will be taken from you and given to a people who will bear its fruit. The one who comes against this stone will be broken, but the one on whom it falls will be pulverized." When the leading priests and the Pharisees realized that the parable was referring to them, they were outraged and wanted to arrest him at once. But they were afraid of the reaction of the crowds because the people considered him to be a prophet. Chapter 22, the parable of the wedding feast. As was his custom, Jesus continued to teach the people by using allegories. He illustrated the reality of heaven's kingdom realm by saying there once was a king who arranged an extravagant wedding feast for his son. On the day the festivities were set to begin, he sent his servants to summon all the invited guests, but they chose not to come. So the king sent even more servants to inform the invited guests, saying, "Come, for the sumptuous feast is now ready. The oxen and fattened cattle have been killed, and everything is prepared to come. Come to the wedding feast for my son and his bride." But the invited guests were not impressed. One was preoccupied with his business, another went off to his farming enterprise, and the rest seized the king's messengers and shamefully mistreated them, and even killed them. This infuriated the king, so he sent his soldiers to execute those murderers and had their cities burnt to the ground. Then the king said to his servants, "The wedding feast is ready, yet those who had been invited to attend didn't deserve the honor. Now I want you to go into the streets and alleyways and invite anyone and everyone you find to come and enjoy the wedding feast in honor of my son." So the servants went out into the city streets and invited everyone to come to the wedding feast, good and bad alike, until the banquet hall was crammed with people. Now when the king entered the banquet hall, he looked with glee over all his guests, but then he noticed a guest who was not wearing the wedding robe provided for him. So he said, "My friend, how is it that you're here and you're not wearing your wedding garment?" But the man was speechless, and the king turned to his servant and said, "Tie him up and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be great sorrow with weeping and grinding of teeth, for everyone is invited to enter in, but few respond in excellence." The Pharisees tried to entrap Jesus. Then the Pharisees came together to make a plan to entrap Jesus with his own words. So they sent some of their disciples together with some staunch staunch supporters actually of Herod. They said to Jesus, "Teacher, we know that you're an honest man of integrity and you teach us the truth of God's ways. We can clearly see that you're not one who speaks only to win the people's favor, because you speak the truth without regard to the consequences. So tell us then what you think is it proper for Jews to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Jesus knew the malice that was hidden behind their cunning ploy, and said, "Why are you testing me, you impostors who think you have all the answers? Show me one of the Roman coins." So they brought him a silver coin used to pay the tax. "Now tell me whose head is on this coin and whose inscription is stamped on it." "Caesar's," they replied. Jesus said, "Precisely, for the coin bears the image of the Emperor Caesar. Well, then, you should pay the emperor what is due to the emperor, but because you bear the image of God, give back to God all that belongs to him." The impostors were baffled in the presence of all the people and were unable to trap Jesus with his words, so they left, stunned by Jesus' words. Marriage and resurrection. Some of the Sadducees, a religious group that denied there was a resurrection of the dead, came to ask Jesus this question. "Teacher, the law of Moses teaches that if a man dies before he has children, his brother should marry the widow and raise up children for his brother's family line. Now, there was a family with 7 brothers. The oldest got married but soon died, leaving his widow for his brother. The second brother married and also died, and the third also. This was repeated down to the seventh brother, when finally the woman also died. So here's our dilemma. Which of the 7 brothers will be the woman's husband when she is resurrected from the dead, since all were once married to her?" Jesus answers them, "You are deluded because your hearts are not filled with the revelation of the Scriptures or the power of God. For after the resurrection, men and women will not marry, just like the angels of heaven don't marry. Haven't you read what God said? 'I am the living God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' God is not the God of the dead, but of the living." When the crowds heard this, they were dazed, stunned over such wisdom. The greatest commandment. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they called a meeting to discuss how to trap Jesus. Then one of them, a religious scholar, posed this question to him: Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus answered him, Love the Lord your God with every passion of your heart, with all the energy of your being, and with every thought that is within you. This is the great and supreme commandment. And the second is like it in importance. You must love your friend in the same way you love yourself. Contained within these commandments, in love, you will find all the meaning of the law and the prophets. That's just a little bit different reading from what the Shema actually is. Um, Jesus, son of David, Lord of David. While all the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus took the opportunity to pose a question of his own. What do you think about the Anointed One? Whose son is he? The son of David, they replied. Then Jesus said to them, How is it that David, inspired by the Holy Spirit, could call his son the Lord? For didn't he say, The Lord Jehovah said to my Lord, Sit near me in the place of authority until I subdue all your enemies under your feet? So how could David call his own son the Lord Jehovah? No one could come up with an answer, and from that day on, none of the Pharisees had the courage to question Jesus any longer. Chapter 23, Superficial Spirituality versus Genuine Humility. Then Jesus addressed both the crowds and his disciples and said, The religious scholars and the Pharisees sit on Moses' throne as the authorized interpreters of the law. So listen and follow what they teach, but don't do what they do. For they tell you one thing and do another. They tie on your backs an oppressive burden of religious obligations and insist that you carry it, but will never lift a finger to help ease your load. Everything they do is done for show and to be noticed by others. They want to be seen as holy, so they wear oversized prayer boxes on their arms and foreheads with scriptures inside and wear extra long tassels on their outer garments. They crave the seats of highest honor at banquets and in their meeting places, and how they love to be admired by men with their titles of respect, aspiring to be recognized in public and have others call them reverend. But you are to be different from that. You are not to be called master, for you have only one master, and you are all brothers and sisters. And you are not to be addressed as Father, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Now, nor are you to be addressed as teacher, for you have one teacher, the Anointed One. The greatest among you will be the one who always serves others from the heart. Remember this: if you have a lofty opinion of yourself and seek to be honored, you will be humbled. But if you have a modest opinion of yourself and choose to humble yourself, you will be honored. Jesus pronounces 7 woes. Great sorrow awaits you religious scholars and you Pharisees, such frauds and pretenders. You do all you can to keep people from experiencing the reality of heaven's kingdom realm. Not only do you refuse to enter in, you also forbid anyone else from entering in. Great sorrow awaits you religious scholars and you Pharisees, frauds and pretenders, for you eat up the widow's household with the ladle of your prayers. Because of this, you will receive a greater judgment. Great sorrows awaits you religious scholars and you Pharisees, such frauds and pretenders, for you will travel over lake and land to find one disciple only to make him twice a child of hell as yourselves. You blind guides, great sorrow awaits you, for you teach that there's nothing binding when you swear by God's temple, but if you swear by the gold of the temple, you are bound by your oath. You are deceived in your blindness, which is greater the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred. And you say that whoever takes an oath by swearing by the altar, it is nothing. But if you swear by the gift upon the altar that you are obligated to keep your oath, what deception? For what is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Whoever swears by the altar swears by the altar and everything offered on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and the one who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by God who sits upon it. Great sorrow awaits you, religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds and pretenders, for you are obsessed with peripheral issues, like insisting on paying meticulous tithes on the smallest herbs that grow in your gardens. These matters are fine, yet you ignore the most important duty of all, is to walk in the love of God, to display mercy to others, and to live with integrity. Readjust your values and place first things first. What blind guides, nitpickers, when we see a lot of nitpickers, on social media platforms, picking on different things of doctrine and what people do, and it's like you never see them actually sharing the kingdom of God. They're just busy, rebuking this one and that one, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. You will spoon out a gnat from your drink, yet at the same time you've gulped down a camel without realizing it. Now, Yeshua, Jesus rebukes the Pharisees and scholars of that time because they were, again, putting it on the people, but not really truly practicing themselves. And he knew in their hearts what they were doing, what they were thinking, and all. So he knew what they were all about. Now, just to mention, we mentioned Sadducees and we mentioned Pharisees. They were part of what is known as the Sanhedrin Council. And the Sanhedrin Council comprises of both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who would argue with one another over resurrection because the Sadducees didn't believe in it, the Pharisees did. And they most of the time didn't really get along with one another, except when it was to come against Jesus. That's when they did. There's also the scribes were part of the Sanhedrin Council as well. Okay, great sorrow awaits you, religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds, and impostors. You are like one who will only wipe clean the outside of a cup or bowl, leaving the inside filthy. You are foolish to ignore the greed and self indulgence that live like germs within you. You are blind and deaf to your evil. Should the one who cleans the outside also be concerned with the cleaning of the inside? You need to have more than clean dishes. You need clean hearts. Great sorrow awaits you, religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds and impostors. You are nothing more than tombs painted with fresh coats of white paint. Tombs that look shining and beautiful on the outside, but within are found decaying corpses full of nothing but corruption. Outwardly, you masquerade as righteous people, but inside your hearts, you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Great sorrow awaits your religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds and impostors. You build memorials for the prophets your ancestors killed, and decorate the monuments of the godly people your ancestors murdered. Then you boast, if we had lived back then, we would have never have permitted them to kill the prophets. But your words and deeds testify that you are just like them and prove that you are indeed the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead and finish what your ancestors started. You are nothing but snakes in the grass and offspring of poisonous vipers. How will you escape the judgment of hell if you refuse to return if you refuse to turn in repentance? For this reason I will send you more prophets and wise men and teachers of truth. Some you will crucify, some you will beat mercilessly with whips in your meeting houses, abusing and persecuting them from, from city to city. As your penalty, you will be held responsible for the righteous blood spilled in the murders of every godly person throughout your history, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias, son of Jehoiada, whom you killed as he stood in the temple between the brazen altar and the holy place. I tell you the truth, the judgment for all these things will fall upon this generation. Jesus prophesies judgment coming to Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you are the city that murders your prophets. You are the city that stones the very messengers who were sent to deliver you. So many times I have longed to gather a wayward people as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were too stubborn to let me. And now it is too late, since your city will be left in ruins. For you will not see me again until you are able to say, we welcome the one who comes to us in the name of the Lord. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. I'm sorry, I want to backtrack there. Got a little ahead of myself there. When Jesus was coming in riding on the colt, actually the people were calling Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. They were actually recognizing him as the king. And Yeshua, Jesus is now saying that these people are not going to see him again until they say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Um, we have people today that we do need to reach, and our Jewish brothers and sisters that have not accepted Yeshua as their Lord and Savior. Um, this refers to them prophetically, and they will, when they declare Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, that's when He will return. Now, it is interesting because the Orthodox and the Reformed are Messiah minded, and they are looking for Messiah. We are in the season of of Messiah's return. He could come any time, as we know, um, because he's been gone for quite some time now. No one knows the day or the hour that he will return, but we know that he is coming soon, because each day draws us closer and closer to his return. And as we see uh, our world getting darker and darker, we know that things are happening, prophecies being fulfilled. Are we there right there at the moment? Not quite. There's some things that need to be fulfilled yet, and it will. There will be nothing left undone, which you will hear Jesus say that. Jesus prophesies the destruction of the temple. Now, this is the second temple that was destroyed in 70 AD. As Jesus was leaving the temple courts, his disciples came to him and pointed out the beautiful aspects of the architecture of the temple structures. And Jesus turned to them and said, take a good look at all these things, for I'm telling you, there will not be one stone left upon another, it will all be leveled. Later, when they arrived at the Mount of Olives, his disciples came privately to where he was sitting and said, tell us, when will these things happen? And what supernatural sign should we expect to signal your coming and the completion of this age? Jesus answered, At the time at that time deception will run rampant. So beware that you are not fooled, for many will appear on the scene claiming my authority or saying about themselves, I am God's anointed, and they will lead many astray. You will hear of wars nearby and revolutions on every side, with more rumors of wars to come. Don't panic or give in to your fears, for the breaking apart of the world's systems is destined to happen. But it won't yet be the end, it will still be unfolding. Nations will go to war against each other and kingdoms against kingdoms, and there will be terrible earthquakes, seismic events of epic proportion, horrible epidemics and famines in place after place. This is how the first contraction and birth pains of the New Age will begin. And we're not talking about New Age, pagan New Age. We're talking about the New Age that Yeshua, Jesus, is talking about. Persecution of believers. You can expect to be persecuted even killed, for you will be hated by all the nations because of your love for me. Then many will stop following me and fall away, and they will betray one another and hate one another. And many lying prophets will arise, deceiving multitudes and leading them away from the path of truth. There will be such an increase of sin and lawlessness that those whose hearts once burned with passion for God and others will grow cold. But keep your hope to the end, and you will experience life and deliverance. Yet through it all, this joyful assurance of the realm of heaven's kingdom will be proclaimed all over the world, providing every nation with a demonstration of the reality of God. And after this, the end of this age will arrive. So, in other words, everyone will hear about Yeshua, what Yeshua endured for us, and have the ability to make the choice to accept Yeshua, which is Jesus, as Lord and Savior before the end comes. So there will be nobody that will stand in heaven and say, I didn't know anything about this. Because everyone will know and have to make that just individual choice. The detestable idol that brings misery. When you witness what Daniel prophesied, the disgusting destroyer taking its stand in the holy place, let the reader learn that this is the abomination of desolation. Yes. Then those in the land of Judah must escape to the higher ground on that day. If you happen to be outside, don't go back inside to gather belongings. And if you're working out in the field, don't run back home to get a coat. It will be especially hard for pregnant women and for those nursing their babies in those days. So pray that your escape will not be during the winter months or in a Sabbath, for this will be a time of great misery beyond the magnitude of anything the world has ever seen or will ever see. Unless God limited those days, no one would escape. But because of his love for those chosen to be his, he will shorten that time of trouble. And you will hear reports from some saying, Look, he has returned. The Messiah is over here, or the Messiah is over there. Don't believe it, for there will be impostors falsely claiming to be God's anointed one. And false prophets will arise to perform miracle signs to lead astray, if possible, those God has chosen to be his. Remember this, for I prophesy it will happen. So if someone says to you, Look, the anointed one has returned, he's in the desert, don't go chasing after him. Or if they say to you, Look, he's here in our house, don't believe it. The appearing of the Son of Man will burst forth with the brightness of lightning strike that shines from one end of the sky to the other, illuminating the sky. How do birds of prey know where the dead body is? They just know how instinctively, and so you will know when I appear. The appearing of the Son of Man, then immediately this is what will take place. The sun will be darkened, and the moon give no light. The stars will fall from the sky, and all the cosmic powers will be shaken. Then the sign announcing the Son of Man will appear in the sky. In the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn over him, and they will see the Son of Man appearing in the clouds of heaven, revealed with mighty powers, great splendor, and glory. And he will send his messengers with the loud blast of the trumpet, and with a great voice they will gather his beloved chosen ones by the four winds from one end of heaven to the other. A parable of the fig tree. Now learn the lesson from the parable of the fig tree. When spring arrives and it sends out its tender branches and sprouts leaves, you know that ripe fruit is about to appear. So it will be with you. For when you observe all these things taking place, you will know that he is near, even at the door. I assure you, the end of this age will not come until all I have spoken comes to pass. The earth and the sky will wear out and fade away before one word I speak loses its power or fails to accomplish its purpose. Now, be careful of the date setters. There are those that are out there date setting and saying the rapture is coming, Jesus is coming. and give dates. Well, we know that he's coming. We know that the church will be raptured at one point or another, and they argue about pre, post, and mid, and post tribulation. Um, it's really interesting to see what people get so wrapped up in and stuck there. Um, because we need to actually be about the Father's business and doing all these things and getting into heated arguments. I've seen that happen. I just scroll by it because it's so time consuming and nothing is being accomplished by it, which is very sad. Um, we are to be evangelists for the kingdom. We're supposed to be sharing the good news of the kingdom and you know inviting people to come to the Lord, to be saved and born again. Time is short. Time is of the essence. We don't know the day or the hour that Jesus is returning, but we know it is soon. I mean, he told the disciples when he left, I'm coming soon. So that was a couple thousand years ago. So we know that he is coming soon. I mean, he is good on his promises. Um, so but the big thing is here is there are people that are out there not reading the Bible and or rightly dividing the word and actually confusing people. They're leading people the wrong way, as Jesus said. They're not to do that. They're not to cause anyone to stumble, or to be confused. You need to follow the Bible and what's in the Bible. So anyway, that's a little bit extra nugget there. Live always ready for his appearing. Concerning that day and exact hour, no one knows when it will arrive. Not even the angels of heaven, only the Father knows. For it will be exactly like it was in the days of Noah, when the Son of Man appears. Before the flood, people lived their lives eating, drinking, marrying, and having children. They didn't realize the end was near until Noah entered the ark, and then suddenly the flood came and took them all away in judgment. It will happen the same way when the Son of Man arrives. At that time, two men will be working on the farm, and one will be taken away in judgment, the other will be left. Um, the two women will be grinding grain. One will be taken away in judgment, the other left. This is why you must stay alert, because no one knows the day your Lord will come. But realize this, if a homeowner had known what time of night the burglar would come to rob his house, he would have been alert and ready and not let his house be robbed. So always be ready, alert, and prepared, because at an hour when you're not expecting him, the Son of Man will come. The wise and faithful servant, who is the one qualified to oversee the master's house, he will be a reliable servant who is wise and faithful, one he can depend on. The master will want to give him the responsibility of overseeing others in the house, for his servant will lead them well and give them food at the right time. What joy and blessing will come to that faithful servant when the master comes home to find him serving with excellence. I can promise you the master will raise him up and put him in charge of all that he owns. But the evil servant says in his heart, my master delays his coming, and who knows when he will return. And because of the delay, the servant mistreats those in his master's household. Instead of caring for the ones he was appointed to serve, he abuses the other servants and gives himself over to eating and drinking with drunkards. Let me tell you what will happen to him. The master will suddenly return at a time that surprises him, and he will remove the abusive, selfish servant from his position of trust, and the master will cut him into and assign him to the place of great sorrow and anguish, along with all the other pretenders and unbelievers. Chapter 25. A parable about 10 virgins. At the time my coming as the time my coming draws near, heaven's kingdom realm can be compared to 10 maidens who took their oil lamps and went outside to meet the bridegroom and his bride. 5 of them were foolish and ill prepared, for oil they took no extra oil to their lamps, and 5 of them were wise and sensible, for they took flasks of olive oil with their lamps. When the bridegroom didn't come when they expected, they all grew drowsy and fell asleep. Then suddenly, in the middle of the night, they were awakened with a shout, "Get up, the bridegroom is here. Come out and have an encounter with him." So all the girls got up and trimmed their lamps, but the foolish ones were running out of oil. So they said to the 5 wise ones, "Share your oil with us, because our lamps are going out." "We can't," they replied. "We don't have enough for all of us. You'll have to go and buy some for yourselves." While the 5 girls were out buying oil, the bridegroom appeared. Those who were ready and waiting were escorted inside with him and the wedding party to enjoy the feast. And then the door was locked. Later the 5 foolish girls came running up to the door and pleaded, "Lord, Lord, let us come in." But he called back, "Go away. Do I know you? I can assure you I don't even know you." That is how That is the reason you should always stay awake and be alert, because you don't know the day or hour when the bridegroom will appear. A parable about financial stewardship. Again, heaven's kingdom realm is like the wealthy man who went on a long journey and summoned all his trusted servants and assigned his financial management over to them. Before he left on his journey, he entrusted a bag of 5,000 gold coins to one of his servants, to another a bag of 2,000 gold coins, and to the third one a bag of 1,000 gold coins, each according to his ability to manage. The one entrusted with 5,000 gold coins immediately went out and traded with the money, and he doubled his investment. In the same way, the one who was entrusted with 2,000 gold coins traded the sum and likewise doubled his investment. But the one who had been entrusted with 1,000 gold coins dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. After much time had passed, the master returned to settle accounts with his servants. The one who was entrusted with 5,000 gold coins came and brought 10,000, saying, "See, I have doubled your money." Commending his servant, the master replied, "You have done well and proven yourself to be my loyal and trustworthy servant. Because you have been a faithful steward to manage a small sum, now I will put you in charge of much, much more. You will experience the delight of your master, who will say to you, 'Come celebrate with me.'" So then the one who had been entrusted with 2,000 gold coins came in and said, "See, my master, I have doubled what you have entrusted to me." Commending his servant, the master replied, "You have done well and proven yourself to be my loyal and trustworthy servant. Because you were faithful to manage a small sum, now I will put you in charge of much, much more. You will experience the delight of your master, who will say to you, 'Come celebrate with me.'" Then the one who had been entrusted with 1,000 gold coins came to his master and said, "Look, sir, I know that you are a hard man to please, and you're a shrewd and ruthless businessman who grows rich on the backs of others. I was afraid of you, so I went and hid your money and buried it in the ground. But here it is. Take it, it's yours." Angered by what he'd heard, the master said to him, "You're a you're an untrustworthy and lazy servant. If you knew I was shrewd and a ruthless businessman who always makes a profit, why didn't you deposit it at why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? Then I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. But because you were unfaithful, I will take the 1,000 gold coins and give them to the one who has 10,000. For the one who has will be given more until he overflows with abundance, and the one with hardly anything, even what little he has, will be taken from him. Then the master said to his other servants, now throw that good for nothing servant far away from me into the outer darkness, where there will be great misery and anguish. The judgment of the multitudes. When the Son of Man appears in his majestic glory with all his angels by his side, he will take his seat on his throne of splendor, and all the nations will be gathered together before him, and like a shepherd who separates the sheep from the goats, he will separate all the people. The sheep he will put on his right side and the goats on his left. Then the king will turn to those on his right and say, you have a special place in my Father's heart. Come and experience the full inheritance of the kingdom realm that has been destined for you from before the foundation of the world. For when you saw me hungry, you fed me. When you found me thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I had no place to stay, you invited me in. And when I was poorly clothed, you covered me. When I was sick, you tenderly cared for me. And when I was in prison, you visited me. Then the godly will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty and give you food and something to drink? When did we see you with no place to stay and invite you in? When did we see you poorly clothed and cover you? When did we see you sick and tenderly care for you, or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, don't you know? When you cared for one of the least important of these, my little ones, my true brothers and sisters, you demonstrated love for me. Then to those on the left the king will say, leave me, for you are under the curse of eternal fire that has been destined for the devil and all his demons. When you saw me hungry, you refused to give me food, and when you saw me thirsty, you refused to give me something to drink. I had no place to stay, and you refused to take me in as your guest. When you saw me poorly clothed, you closed your hearts and would not cover me. When you saw that I was sick, you didn't lift a finger to help me, and when I was imprisoned, you never came to visit me. And then those on the left will say, Lord, when do we see you hungry or thirsty and not give you food and something to drink? When did we see you homeless or poorly clothed? When did we see you sick and not help you, or in prison and not visit you? Then he will answer them, don't you know, when you refuse to help one of the least important among these, my little ones, my true brothers and sisters, you refuse to help me and honor me, and they will depart from his presence and go into eternal punishment, but the godly and beloved sheep will enter into eternal bliss. Chapter 26. Jesus prophesies the crucifixion. After Jesus had completed his teachings, he said to his disciples, you know that the feast of Passover begins in 2 more days. That's when the Son of Man is to be betrayed and handed over to be crucified. Meanwhile, the prominent priests and religious leaders of the nations were gathered in the palace of the high priest Caiaphas. That's when they made their decision to secretly have Jesus captured and killed. But they all agreed, we can't do this during the Passover celebrations, or we could have a riot on our hands. A woman anoints Jesus. Then Jesus went to Bethany, to the home of Simon, a man Jesus had healed of leprosy. A woman came into the house holding an alabaster flask filled with fragrant and expensive oil. She walked right up to Jesus, and in a lavish gesture of devotion, she poured out the costly oil, and it cascaded over his head as he was at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were offended. What a total waste, they grumbled. We could have sold it for a great deal of money and given it to the poor. Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, "Why are you critical of this woman? She has done a beautiful act of kindness for me. You will always have someone poor whom you can help, but you will not always have me." When she poured the fragrant oil over me, she was preparing my body for burial. I promise you that as this wonderful gospel spreads all over the world, the story of her lavish devotion to me will also be mentioned in memory of her. And I do think we're going to end up doing it at part two. It'll be much shorter, but it looks like we're on the last half hour of what I can actually upload. Okay, Judas agrees to betray Jesus. One of the 12 apostles, Judas the locksmith, went to the leading priests and said, "How much are you willing to pay me to betray Jesus into your hands?" They agreed to pay him 30 silver coins. Immediately, Judas began to scheme and look for an opportunity to betray him. Jesus celebrates Passover with his disciples. On the first day of Passover, the day when any bread made with yeast was removed from every Jewish home, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where should we prepare the Passover meal for you?" He answered them, "My heart longs with great desire to eat this Passover meal with you. Go into Jerusalem, and you will encounter a man. Tell him that the teacher says, 'My appointed time is near. I am coming to your home to eat the Passover meal with my disciples.'" The disciples did as Jesus had instructed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When evening came, he took his place at the table and dined with the 12. While they were eating, Jesus spoke up and said, "One of you is about to betray me." Feeling deeply hurt by these words, one after another asked him, "You don't mean me, do you?" He answered, "It is one who shared meals with me as an intimate friend. All that was prophesied of me will take place, but how miserable it will be for the one who betrays the Son of Man. It would be far better for him if he had never been born." Then finally, Judas the traitor spoke up and asked him, "Teacher, perhaps it is I?" And Jesus answered, "You said it." The Lord's Supper. As they ate, Jesus took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to the disciples. He said to them, "This is my body, eat it." Then taking the cup of wine and giving praises to the Father, he entered into covenant with them, saying, "This is my blood. Each of you must drink it in fulfillment of the covenant. But this is the blood that seals the new covenant. It will be poured out for many for the complete forgiveness of sins." The next time we drink this, I will be with you, and we will drink it together and with new understanding in the kingdom realm of my Father. Then they sang a psalm and left for the Mount of Olives. Jesus prophesies Peter's denial. Along the way, Jesus said to them, "Before the night is over, you will all desert me. This will fulfill the prophecy of the scripture that says, 'I will strike down the shepherd, and all the sheep will scatter far and wide.' But after I am risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee, and will meet you there." Then Peter spoke up and said, "Even if all the rest lose their faith and fall away, I will still be beside you, Jesus." "Are you sure, Peter?" Jesus said. "In fact, before the rooster crows a few hours from now, you will have denied me 3 times." Peter replied, "I absolutely will never deny you, even if I have to die with you." And all the others said the same thing. Jesus prays in Gethsemane. Then Jesus led his disciples to an orchard called the Oil Press. He told them, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." He took Peter, Jacob, and John with him. However, an intense feeling of great sorrow plunged his soul into deep sorrow and agony. And he said to them, "My heart is overwhelmed and crushed with grief. It feels as though I'm dying. Stay here and keep watch with me." Then he walked a short distance away, and overcome with grief, he threw himself face down on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if there's any way you can deliver me from this suffering, please take it from me. Yet what I want is not important, for I only desire to fulfill your plan for me." Then an angel from heaven appeared to strengthen him. Later he came back to his 3 disciples and found them all sound asleep. He awakened Peter and said to him, "Do you lack the strength to stay awake with me for even just an hour? Keep alert and pray that you'll be spared from this time of testing. You should have learned by now that your spirit is eager enough, but your humanity is weak." Then he left them for a second time to pray in solitude. He said to God, "My Father, if there is not a way that you can deliver me from this suffering, then your will must be done." He came back to the disciples and found them sound asleep, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he left them and went away to pray the same prayer for the third time. When he returned again to his disciples, he awoke them, saying, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Don't you know the hour has come for the Son of Man to be handed over to the authority of sinful men? Get up and let's go, for the betrayer has arrived." The betrayal and arrest of Jesus. At that moment, Judas, his once trusted disciple, appeared along with a large crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent to arrest Jesus by order of the ruling priests and Jewish religious leaders. Now, Judas was the traitor, uh, and that had arranged to give them a signal that would identify Jesus, for he had told them, "Jesus is the one whom I will kiss, so grab him." Judas quickly stepped up to Jesus and said, "Shalom, Rabbi," and he kissed him on both cheeks. "My beloved friend," Jesus said, "is this why you've come?" Then the armed men seized Jesus to arrest him, but one of the disciples pulled out a dagger and swung it at the servant and the high priest, slashing off his ear. Jesus said to him, "Put your dagger away, for all those who embrace violence will die by violence. Don't you realize that I could ask my heavenly Father for angels to come at any time to deliver me, and instantly he would answer me by sending 12 armies of the angelic host to come and protect me? But that would thwart the prophetic plan of God, for it has been written that it would happen this way." Then Jesus turned to the mob and said, "Why would you arrest me with swords and clubs as though I were an outlaw? Day after day I sat in the temple courts, actually, with you, teaching the people, yet you didn't arrest me." But all of this fulfills the prophetic and the prophecies of the scriptures. At that point, all of his disciples ran away and abandoned him, as he had told them that they would do. Jesus is condemned by the religious leaders. Those who arrested Jesus had led him away to Caiaphas, the chief priest, and to a meeting where the religious scholars and the Supreme Jewish Council were already assembled. Now Peter had followed the mob from a distance all the way to the chief priest's courtyard, and after entering, he sat with the servant and of the chief priest, who had gathered there, waiting to see how things would unfold. The chief priest actually and the entire Supreme Jewish Council of leaders were doing their best to find false charge that they could bring against Jesus, because they were looking for a reason to put him to death. Many false witnesses came forward, but the evidence could not be corroborated. Finally, 2 men came forward and declared, "This man said, I can destroy God's temple and build it again in 3 days." And the chief priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Have you nothing to say about these allegations? Is what they're saying about you true?" But Jesus remained silent before them. So the chief priest said to him, "I charge you under oath in the name of the living God, tell us once and for all if you are the anointed Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus answered him, "You just said it yourself, and more than that, you are about to see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of God the Almighty, and one day you will also see the Son of Man coming in the heavenly clouds." This infuriated the chief priest, and as an act of outrage, he tore his robe and shouted, "What blasphemy! No more witnesses are needed, for you heard this grievous blasphemy." Turning to the council, he said, "Now, what is your verdict?" "He's guilty and deserves the death penalty," they answered. And they spit on his face and slapped him. Others struck him over and over with their fists. Then they taunted him by saying, "O anointed one, prophesy to us. Tell us which one of us is about to hit you next." Peter's denials. Meanwhile, Peter was still sitting outside in the courtyard when a servant girl came up to him and said, "I recognize you. You were with Jesus the Galilean." In front of everyone, Peter denied it and said, I don't have a clue what you're talking about." Later, as he stood near the gateway of the courtyard, another servant girl noticed him and said, "I know this man is a follower of Jesus the Nazarene." Once again, Peter denied it, and with an oath he said, "I tell you, I don't know the man." A short time later, those standing nearby approached Peter and said, "We know you're one of his disciples. We can tell by your speech. Your Galilean accent gives you away." Peter denied it, and using profanity, he said, "I don't know the man." At that very moment, the sound of a crowing rooster pierced the night. Then Peter remembered the prophecy of Jesus: "Before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times." With a shattered heart, Peter went out of the courtyard, sobbing with bitter tears. And we're going to pause it now to actually go to part 2. We just have chapter 27 and 28, but there's still quite a bit to read because in this Bible I am on page 408, and we've got to actually get to actually, wait a minute. We've got to get to fourth. Well, actually, yeah, 413. Yeah, it's actually looks like it is 1 hour and close to 50 minutes on here, so that's not going to cut it. And it may not actually be that, but this is what the online recorder is reading now. But when I finalize it may show that I actually had some extra time, but I never can trust this because it doesn't actually always show the exact time, but I can kind of gauge when I'm getting close. So to be on the safe side, we're going to pause it here, close this out, and then come back with a part 2.